Good morning. Thank you so much for joining me this Wednesday morning. Today, we are going to talk about Social Security disability for rheumatoid arthritis. And today, through the webinar, we're going to start out talking about some Social Security disability basics. Then we'll shift into some guidance from the agency about rheumatoid arthritis, and then talk about the potential listing of 14.09, and then some additional considerations. And then, of course, I always like to end the webinar with how an attorney can help you with your Social Security disability case. A little bit about me. My name is Kaitlin Wildoner. I'm the founding attorney of Beacon Disability PLLC, which is a law firm based in Florida. We exclusively practice federal administrative law, and we can assist clients throughout the United States with agency-level Social Security disability insurance and supplemental security income. So that's SSDI and SSI matters. If it's something that we cannot help you with for some reason, we always try to connect you with somebody who can. So feel free to reach out. We'll have our contact information at the end of the webinar. The other thing I want to say is if you are watching on the live, please do not put any personal health information in the chat. I do not answer questions on the live. And the reason why I don't answer any questions on the live is because I don't want your personal health information being out there. It's impossible to really give a concrete answer with respect to Social Security disability claims and questions unless I know a lot about the situation. And so I don't want you to put everything in the chat because I might even need to know more than that. So what I'll usually say is we'll also go ahead and put in the live chat a link to schedule a phone consultation with us. And on the replay, that link to schedule a phone consultation will be below in the description. So if you have questions, please don't put them in the chat or in the comments with any personal identifying information, but instead reach out to us directly. You can call, email, or like I said, there's a direct link to schedule a call at a time that's convenient for you. So with that being said, let's go ahead and shift into Social Security disability basics. So first of all, as I alluded to before, there are two different programs. There's Social Security Disability Insurance, which is SSDI benefits, and then there's Supplemental Security Income, which are SSI benefits. Both programs require that you be disabled for a period of at least 12 months, meaning you are totally disabled, totally unable to work due to severe medically determinable physical and or mental impairments. So that's the similarities between the programs. You have to be disabled and unable to work. Where they differ is with SSDI, that program to qualify, in addition to being disabled, you also have to have a sufficient number of work credits. Generally speaking, that means you have to have worked for 5 of the last 10 years. The other program, SSI, does not have that work credit requirement, but instead it does have income and asset restrictions. So again, generally speaking, with SSI to qualify, those income and asset restrictions are you have to have less than $2,000 in assets if you're single and less than $3,000 in assets if you are married. For income, that does change a little bit, and there can be a reduction, including for kind of in-kind income, if somebody is giving you food or shelter. So those are all things to consider for SSI. The 5-step evaluation process. When you submit your application for Social Security disability, whether it's SSDI or SSI, the agency goes through a 5-step evaluation process to determine if you are disabled or not according to their rules. So the first step in that 5-step process is, are you engaging in substantial gainful activity? If you are, which is earning more than $1,350 a month in 2022, or working more than 20 hours a week, if you are doing either of those, Social Security will automatically say you, by our definition, cannot be found disabled, and they'll go ahead and deny the case there. If you are not engaging in substantial gainful activity, the agency moves to step 2, which is to see, do you have any severe medically determinable impairments? If you don't have any severe impairments, then Social Security will again deny the case at that stage and say you don't have any severe impairments. By our definition, you cannot be disabled. If you have at least one severe medically determinable impairment, Social Security will move to step 3 and see, okay, do you meet or equal a listing? And in doing that, they'll take a look at your medical records. They'll compare it to the Blue Book of Listings. We'll talk about the rheumatoid arthritis listing here in just a minute. And they will look to see, okay, do you meet or equal one of our listings? If you do, the analysis stops there and you'll be found disabled. If you do not, the analysis continues. Social Security will create a residual functional capacity for you based on your medical records, and they will take that residual functional capacity, that RFC, and say, okay, can an individual with this RFC and your age, education, and past work experience, can they return to past work? If you can return to past work, Social Security stops the analysis. They send their denial letter. You can go back to your past work. You're not disabled. If you cannot return to your past work, Social Security will then move to step 5, which is to say, can you engage in any other work? And again, they do that by looking at your RFC, your age, your education, your past work, any transferable skills you might have from that work or education, and say, is there any job that exists in the national economy that you could perform? Okay, if you can engage in other work, then you're found not disabled. If there is no other work that you can engage in, then you are found not disabled. Or no, you are found disabled. I'm sorry about that. If you can engage in other work, you are not disabled. There's other work you can do, you are not disabled. If you cannot engage in any other work, you are disabled. So that's how we get a finding of disability at step 5, is if you cannot engage in any other work. Okay, did I clarify that? Yes, okay, perfect, thank you. All right, so turning to specific considerations with respect to rheumatoid arthritis. Social Security does acknowledge that the spectrum of inflammatory arthritis, including RA, has a vast array of disorders, and inflammatory arthritis has a variety of different causes, courses, and outcomes. So here you've got kind of what Social Security is going to look at. They might look for inflammation of major joints in either your upper or lower extremities. That inflammation and swelling might result in difficulties with walking or with your fine and gross motor movements with your hands. There might also be some joint pain, swelling, or tenderness involved. The arthritis might affect the other joints or cause less limitation in walking or fine motor gross movements. So when they look at that, that's kind of what they're predominantly looking at. And then they look at additional features, such as the constitutional signs and symptoms of severe fatigue, fever, malaise, or involuntary weight loss. With all of that combined, it's possible that inflammatory arthritis can still result in an extreme limitation without having kind of difficulties with walking or with using fine and gross motor movements. When it comes to medical records with RA, Social Security is generally going to look at the clinical features and serologic findings described in the most recent edition of the Primer on Rheumatic Diseases published by the Arthritis Foundation. So talk to your doctor about that. Make sure they are documenting the file to indicate what features and findings you have that match up with that Primer on Rheumatic Diseases most recently published by the Arthritis Foundation. Okay. Looking at the listings, there are 4 different parts to listing 1409, and we're going to talk about 3 of them. The other one is not terribly related to RA. We usually see RA come under either A, B, or D, I believe it is. So with 1409A, you've got to have, and this is all in the medical documentation that you have to show, that there's a persistent inflammation or persistent deformity of, this one is just 1409A1, is just for your lower extremity. If you've got that persistent inflammation or deformity of one or more of your major joints in your lower extremity, and there's a medical documentation of needing a cane or bilateral canes, a walker, or bilateral crutches, or if you need like a wheeled and seated mobility device, that would all of those require the use of both of your hands. Or if you have one or more major joints in the lower extremity with persistent inflammation or deformity and an inability to use at least one of your upper extremities to independently initiate, sustain, and complete activities, and a need for a one-handed handheld assistive device. So both hands, basically, this 1409A1 is talking about your lower extremities. You've got to have the persistent inflammation or deformity in the lower extremities, as well as an inability to use both upper extremities, whether that's because you need a walker, bilateral canes, bilateral crutches, some kind of assistive device that requires the use of both hands, or if it's because you have a one-handed assistive device and you can't use the other upper extremity for some reason. Okay, so that's 1409A1. 1409A2 is if you have one or more major joints in each upper extremity and medical documentation of an inability to use both of those upper extremities, such that you cannot use either one to independently initiate, sustain, and complete work-related activities that include fine and gross motor movements. Okay, so that's 1409A, and as you can see, that's even broken down further into 1409A1 and 1409A2. 1409B requires inflammation or deformity in one or more major joints of upper or lower extremity, so arms or legs pretty much, with the additional involvement of at least two or more body systems, with one of the organs or body systems involved to at least a moderate level of severity, and at least two of the constitutional symptoms or signs, including severe fatigue, fever, malaise, or involuntary weight loss. As I said, we skip 1409C. It's not terribly relevant to RA. Here's 1409D is if you've got medical documentation of repeated manifestations of inflammatory arthritis with at least two of the constitutional signs or symptoms, again, severe fatigue, fever, malaise, involuntary weight loss, and at least one of the following three at the marked level. So you've got to have either a marked limitation in your ability to perform activities of daily living, marked limitation in your ability to maintain social functioning, marked limitation in your ability to complete tasks in a timely manner due to deficiencies in concentration, persistence, or pace. Listing level severity in 1409A is shown by the presence of an impairment-related physical limitation of functioning. Okay, so that the physical limitation of functioning has to be connected to the impairments. Okay, and as you can see, that's why it requires, the crutches, walkers, canes, inability to use upper extremities. Whereas when you look at 1409B and D, that is shown by inflammatory arthritis that involves various combinations of complications of one or more major joints in either the upper or lower extremity or other joints. Okay, so far on the same page? Okay. Additional considerations. Anytime we're talking about Social Security disability cases, medical records are key. I say it time and time again, and yet it's still, it's not that it doesn't hit home, it's that you kind of can't say it enough. Because especially with a condition like RA, where the doctors might be saying, well, there's nothing I can really do for you other than giving you medication, that's fine. Going to the doctors, having them document what is going on with you, what limitations you have is critical, and getting that medication that might help so that you can get back to a level of functioning. So medical records are important. And again, the issue in Social Security disability cases is not just, can you go back to your past work, but can you perform any job that exists in the national economy? Is there any job that exists that you can perform in the national economy based on your past work, your age, your education, and your residual functional capacity? If you are 50 or older, the grid rules might apply. They might come into play. They depend on your RFC, your age, your education. Okay. Functional capacity can also be relevant, particularly if you're under age 50. If you are over age 50, functional capacity is also relevant because kind of where you fall on that functional capacity chart determines what grid rules might apply. And depending on age and that functional capacity, certain grid rules are more advantageous than others. Objective medical records will be important. It can be really hard to do with RA. Because it doesn't tend to show up on, an X-ray, an MRI, a CT, things like that. So what it comes down to is having a team of doctors that, recognizes what's going on and does what they can to help you. All right. And then finally, how can an attorney help you? We help by providing guidance on what correspondence from Social Security actually means. If you are either already on board with us or you come to us in enough time after a denial, we can help file some appeals. We review your medical records and case file. We, after doing that, can discuss what additional records can be helpful to your case. As I mentioned, medical records are critical. So having somebody on board on your team helping with your disability case who understands what the agency is looking for, who can look at your medical records and see, okay, do we have a gap? And better question, do you have the resources to address that gap? Not everybody does. I have a lot of clients that don't have the resources to go see their own private doctor more than once a month or once every other month. I have other clients, sorry about that. I have other clients who also are using charitable healthcare. And so they kind of have to go by the whims of what those doctors are willing and able to do as far as a timeline for seeing them. So it can be hard, and we recognize that. But that's still something that we do. We review the file and then discuss what additional records might be helpful if it's reasonable in your situation. We can review your documents for accuracy and completeness. We can never fill out kind of the questionnaires that Social Security sends you because we don't know what you're going through on a daily basis. And I'm talking specifically about the pain, anxiety, cardiac function, those questionnaires. The work history report, especially if you're over 50, we will help you fill out because we want to make sure it's done correctly. We also will discuss what Social Security is looking for in their requested forms. As I kind of just alluded to, that work history report for people 50 and up, super important. So we discuss what Social Security is looking for. We discuss what the forms are used for, all of that kind of stuff. We work with you to provide relevant updates back and forth from you to Social Security, from Social Security to you throughout the claim. If your case has to go to hearing, we prepare you for that hearing with an administrative law judge, and we would also question you and any witnesses. And when we're talking about witnesses, we're not usually talking about family members, but instead we are talking about the vocational witness, the potential medical witness. If there is a family member that the judge is willing to have, if you are one of our clients, you know what I tend to do about family member witnesses. If you and I haven't talked about that yet, please reach out to me. I'm happy to chat with you about what we tend to do with family and friend witnesses and what we've kind of found tends to work best. Every judge is different, but what we've typically found to work best. Because you've got to remember, we've only got 45 minutes, maybe an hour for the hearing. So it's not a lot of time. So it's not, the primary focus is on getting you to explain to the judge, and I'm going on a tangent now. But the primary focus of the hearing is getting you an opportunity to explain to a real person with the Social Security Administration who has a real impact on what the decision can be, getting them to understand what you go through on a daily basis when that's combined with the medical records. So anyway, I'm going off on a witness tangent. I'll stop. But that is something that we do. Question you and any witnesses during the hearing. Again, if you are a client and you are at the hearing level and we have not talked about witnesses, send me an email. We will schedule a time to chat about that. Okay, there's a lot of other things an attorney can do. This is just kind of the most prominent list of things, I would say, the list of things that we get questions about most often. But again, there is more that we can do. Here is our contact information. Feel free to give us a call, send us an email. We've put in the chat on the live a link to the calendar to schedule a call if you've got questions. We will also put a link to that in the description below. So please, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you so much for joining. Have a great day.